Welcome to AI Insights Podcast, where we explore artificial intelligence across the globe. I'm your host, Carolina da Luz. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Eza Israel, an expert in AI, and I heard the term artificial intelligence from the first time from Eza many years ago, before ChatGPT was launched. So, Eza, welcome. How are
Thank
you?
you so much. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be
I
a
am.
part of the launching of this beautiful podcast.
I'm very happy to be here with you. So, let's start. Can you start by telling us your background and how you got to AI?
Sure, absolutely. So, myself, actually, I came from a finance background. So, my original industry that I started off in was doing mortgages at the very young age of 19 in New York City, one of the most competitive markets possible in the world. And over the years, I progressed and increased my knowledge in different areas of finance. And eventually, I opened my own financial firm, kind of creating like a one-stop shop for my clients. And what started originally with a simple idea of becoming a one-stop shop for all different financial services for consumers became eventually becoming a one-stop shop for all types of customers, meaning business owners, entrepreneurs like myself, as well as for the consumer. And thankfully, we did very well and we succeeded, thank God. And from that success spurred on the next iterations of our business. And where it started for us was actually trying to figure out ways to systematize our own business. And then from there, it spurred on these additional innovations that we needed, that we realized that if it was helpful for our business, it could be helpful for all businesses. And there, this is where this idea of focusing on artificial intelligence came to be.
Okay. Amazing. It's amazing that everybody that I speak to, everybody has a different story to share about AI because it's new to everybody. So, Isa, what are the most exciting trends or some trends that you are seeing in AI that you can share with us?
Well, I want to say that the trends that are popularized right now in AI are actually, believe it or not, stemming from the same necessities that I started with originally when I first got into software sales. The problem that most people have in their business is efficiency of time. And to effectively use their time, they needed to create automations in their business. So here's a simple example of an automation that we had, right? Let's say we had a customer for a financial service, and this financial service was a very robust service which required a very long, lengthy contract. Our average contracts were about 30 pages long. In the old way of doing things, we would have an attorney who manually would create the contract every single time that a new client was being onboarded. This was A, very expensive, B, very time
More
consuming,
time.
right? And also very slow, right? Because imagine this, imagine you have a customer that is on the phone with you right now. They want to move forward, they want to close the deal, they want to get the job done, and they want you to get started. But you tell them, wait, sorry, I have to give you 3 days just to make a contract for you, right? This is crazy, but that's how business used to be, right? So early on in the early days, we started looking for ways to automate these processes, right? So the very first thing we did is we simplified our contracts and made them into templates, right? Now, these templates still needed to be filled out manually. So even filling out a template would take 30, 40 minutes, right?
Okay.
So because the template had maybe about 700 to 800 individual fields, a lot of which were repetitive. For example, using the person's name over and over again on different pages of the agreement, right? So the first step in that dynamic was to program contracts to be able to absorb fields automatically from a CRM. Now, this sounds very simple today, but when it was new and this didn't exist yet, guess what you had to do? You had to hire a programmer, a developer, then a UI expert to make it all look pretty, right?
That's what I wanted to ask you, because today we have make.com, NHN, and etc. Before that, how you was doing with programmers, developers, and
Right. So we used to have to do it the old-fashioned way, put out an ad in the newspaper or online saying, "Hey, we're looking for a developer," then interview
okay.
people, then guess and check, and a lot of headaches and a lot of money later.
What year are we talking about?
2000, I want to say 2008.
Okay. Old school AI.
Old school, before AI was even considered to be something important, right? And from that, we decided that we needed to find companies that were already creating existing small parts of what we needed. And instead of having to hire our own developers, we realized the limitation you have with your own internal developer is that if they don't have a skill set that you need, you either have to pay them to go and learn it, or you have to find another developer for them to team up with. And then you have problems where if one developer works one way with one coding language and doesn't work with another coding language, good luck trying to get them to work together, right? It would never work. The other side of it is you were kind of held hostage by your developer, because if there was a problem, if there was a glitch, if there was any issue, guess what? You're taking thousands of dollars out of your pocket to fix the problem, right?
And knowledge, honor,
Yeah.
and that's it.
And that's it, right? And you were locked
Show
into,
me the money.
yeah, exactly. And you were locked into whatever that person was telling you because you didn't know any better yourself, right? Now, this also opened the door to a lot of hard lessons we had to take as a company, and myself also, where we had scammers that would rip us off because we didn't know any better, right? So I'll give you a simple example. Like when we were building out our multi-page sites and our multi-sites, where it was multiple websites that all fed into one funnel, right? The developer we had at one point actually would put intentional glitches into the system with a timer. So like once every 2 weeks, something would go wrong, or once every week, something would go wrong.
Really?
So that we would
My
pay him
God.
extra to correct the problem that he was causing himself. So when we started seeing these types of problems, you
Humans.
can imagine
Yes.
this sounds like a small problem, but now look at it from our client's perspective, not from our perspective. This would make the client angry if they couldn't log into their client portal, if they couldn't
Sure.
get updates
Of
properly,
course.
right? If they missed emails, everything would affect the relationship with the client, but also the amount of money that the client could win or lose depending on the contract that we were working. So we realized that the best way to approach this would be to look at companies that were solving the individual problems we were having as a one-off service, and then find ways to connect those two things. So here's an example of one such thing. We had a software called PandaDoc, which was at the time, before AI, they were just a software that allowed you to take paperwork that you uploaded and then convert it into a digital format that was editable. And then if you needed to, you could then connect it to a CRM. And then our CRM at the time was called Pipedrive. And we were connecting it via a internal API for the CRM for certain functions. And then in addition, we had to get an outsourced third-party translation software like Zapier to do additional features that neither of the two softwares had available internally, right? And this, as you can see, it sounds already a little bit crazy. And this was just one small piece of our business, just to do contracts efficiently. Long story short, originally we had 4 different templates that we started with. It took me about a week of programming because back then you had to do manual coding for each field, right? So I had each contract was 800 fields times 4 contracts. That's 3,200 fields that you had to manually code to make sure that did it line up correctly on the page? Did it fill in the correct information from the CRM? All of these different individual things. Today, you can have an AI
you do
agent.
that, what, in 1 hour?
Exactly. And then the funny thing is today, AI agents can do pretty much everything I just described like this in a split second,
Yes.
not a week, 2 weeks, not, like that. Just as quickly as you can engage with them and tell them what you need, that quickly they can produce the result, right? And this originally started off as what we refer to as automations or optimizations, right? So what originally started as our internal necessity to solve our internal problem of speeding up our ability to service the client better became, wait a second, if it helps my business, I bet there's other businesses with the same problem and I can help them too, right? So this
Sure.
is what started me on my AI journey. Right. So in the early days, what we actually started doing is we started researching different companies. And way back when, one of the very first companies I started looking into, because they claimed to be a all-in-one service, which I learned early on that all-in-one services can be a gift and a curse at the same time, depending on your relationship with them, right? Because generally speaking, all-in-ones can be effective for simplicity, but can be cumbersome if you want customization, right? So I started with a company out of Canada actually called Royalty. And back then, they were a simple marketing agency that provided these little miniature devices about as big as something like this, you know? And
Okay.
these devices would send text messages to people's cell phones if they came within 100 meters, right? So it was a cool way if you wanted to do local advertising. Anybody that walks by gets a coupon from your business or gets an offer from your business. And that's what it started from.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
then little by little, it evolved into geotagging. And then geotagging evolved into website development. And website development evolved into online ads and online marketing. And all of these components ended up getting stitched together as like one sequence of events where one system was able to do all of these different functionalities, right? And
What a
uh,
complexity, right?
yeah, and
A
it
lot of
sounds good.
things
Yeah, and it
altogether.
sounds good you think so on paper, right? Like just describing it, it sounds amazing. But now let's talk about the day-to-day actual usage of this, right? Constant glitches, constant problems,
I
constant
imagine.
things not working, things crashing. It works on one type of phone, but not on another type of phone. Lots of headaches, right? So after a year of investing my time and energy, plus about $40,000 of lost funding, trying to get this all to work, we scrapped the project completely. We gave up on it. It didn't work. It was just too much of a headache, right? So at that point, I realized that the biggest mistake I was making was trying to put, as the expression in English goes, put all my eggs in one basket, right? And I realized that very quickly I had to diversify in order to make it work effectively. So at that point, this is now we've fast forwarded from 2007, 2008 to now, let's say 2009, 2010, in that period,
Okay.
right? So now in this period, we started looking at how many different softwares are coming out to solve one problem. So, for example, there's a software that came out that solves recording videos properly. Another software came out
As
that
says that as we know nowadays, or was a different model?
all different models back then. This is long
Okay.
before. This is still before AI, right? And at that time period, I spent basically like a year researching maybe 400 different companies to be able to understand not just what they do, but how to partner with them, right? And then little by little, in this diversification and vetting process, I was able to narrow it down to about 70 or 80 different companies that became my official partners, right? And in this dynamic, I was able to start building my own affiliate system and my affiliate network. And I was able to provide these services very cheaply for others to be able to take advantage of. And then,
Genius.
yeah, little bit a simple idea, and then just keep adding to it, right? Little by
Mm-hmm.
little. And then I started realizing, wait a second, from these companies that I'm partnered with, it's very hard to convince them to partner with each other because of the fact that they don't want to compete with their competitor, or they don't want to divert their attention from the focus on what they're trying to develop, right? Because at that time, everybody was already racing to develop the next concept or the next functionality, right? So I realized early on that the same way that I was creating automations by linking different softwares internally for my business to function better, I realized that if I link these softwares somehow and show people how they can connect these softwares to get a better end product, then I can now call this an optimization. And that's where my brand USFA came to life, where we decided to call ourselves your source for artificial intelligence optimizations, right? Because everybody was promoting their ability to communicate one concept, right? So, for example, one of the early ones was a company called Jasper, which since has changed their name like 50 times for legal reasons and licensing reasons and so on. But they were simply a AI content generator that generated written context, right? So, for example, if somebody wanted to write a script for a video, or if they wanted to write a speech, or if they wanted to write an essay about a certain topic, right? This software was able to take their 1 or 2 sentences of information and extrapolate this by pulling information from the internet that was relevant to that 1 sentence you put in. So if I told it, for example,
A cousin of we have today.
say again?
Kind of similar of we have today, like
Yes, exactly. So like what was the first generation of what we have today? Exactly, where you give it 1 sentence and then it gives you every detail, every fact relating to that question or sentence that you give it, right? Back
already generative AI,
generative, but with many limitations, right? Because the limitation was it couldn't think yet, right? And they were developing to teach it how to think. So the same way that today we would train or teach an AI agent on a certain subject, right, or a certain subject matter, back then they didn't have this programming language yet, right? It didn't exist yet. Back then it was just algorithms that were trying to reason with each other and try to come up with the best answer. So it wasn't as fast as we have it today, and it also wasn't as good as we have it today, where a lot of times the information or the data being given was illogical. It didn't make any sense. It was silly, or it gave you like responses that didn't make sense, right, to whatever the question was you were asking, until you would go into it and say, hey, ask me 20 questions. And then based on 20, 30 questions, you would now get a more accurate answer. Right. So at that time, we had 3 different connections that we had made, and the way it worked was like this: we had one software that would create the written content, then a different software which at the time was called Vidnami. It ended up getting bought out by GoDaddy many years later. But basically, Vidnami would take the written text and pull snippets of YouTube videos and stitch them together to match whatever the text was that you inputted, right? And now you would have a beautiful video that was made for you in seconds. And of course,
and that was very disruptive at the moment, at the time.
At the time, it was extremely disruptive.
With video?
Whoa. Oh, yeah. Big time. And it allowed content creators to create YouTube videos and social media videos and clips very quickly and efficiently. And
yes, with reference.
Yeah, and it didn't have to be perfect, but at least it matched what the main idea of the context was. And it would even add in subtitles, it would add in background music and effects and all kinds of cool stuff. But now the next problem was you have this beautiful content. Now you still got to go and manually upload it to different places, right? And each time you manually upload it, you have to change the formatting and adjust it and change the scaling. Right? So now I took a 3rd software that did exactly that, and I connected these 3 into a sequence. And this became my first optimization that I ever started selling. Right? Because the idea was that it was great if you had any one of the 3, it was fantastic. But if you merge the 3 together and you teach the person that you can go from a 1-sentence idea or 2-sentence idea to a full script, to a full video, and then have that video distributed across all the platforms at the same time,
was wonderful.
Mind-blowing, right?
Yes, mind
It,
blowing.
this was what really launched the whole AI revolution, right? Because a lot of individuals like myself were going through the same problems, dealing with all these different software brands, and realizing that what was this all leading to was going to be ways to make efficiency the number one priority, right? So if you
Right.
look at, for example, from a hardware perspective, if you look at what AI has caused the speed of the industry to increase, it's absolutely astronomical, right? We used to be able to get excited if a phone, for example, something like this, could handle a terabyte of data. We were like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Wow. Today, you can have supercomputers just a little bit bigger than this phone that can handle thousands of petabytes of data. And just to give
Yes.
you an idea of what that means, so we're talking a terabyte is over here, 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte, and it can do thousands of these petabytes of data transfer and analysis per second, right? And now, even moving forward, I don't even know the proper terminology for it, but we have a speed now with Nvidia's new chips that they've just now launched and released that can take that and multiply that times 180,000 in terms of scale.
And even though with all this velocity that has changed,
Mm-hmm.
US is still building places to run the models and everything because it is physically needed these chips to work, even though they are small. Imagine how many of them are being built, right?
Oh, absolutely. For example, here in Arizona, where I live, it's absolutely astonishing how many different major tech companies have come into the valley here and have started building massive, massive data centers exactly for this
Yes.
reason. Exactly for this reason. So we have Intel here, we have Amazon here, Nvidia is opening another factory here. There's also a chip maker, IMTC, I believe, that is also opening a facility here. So this is kind of a hotbed for all these different facilities making exactly these chips and these data centers to be able to power AI. You know, so
Isa,
mhm,
I have a question that I didn't think before, but
okay.
how you are seeing in the American market this Trump new approach to AI in terms of no regulation and yes investment, a lot of investment. How is being like in practice on the daily basis? What can you say to us?
Well, it's a mixed bag, right? Because there isn't one simple answer. I believe there has to be some level of regulation due to the fact that there, unfortunately, human nature is not always the best nature, as they
All
say.
the market,
Yeah,
all the time, in all the
right, right.
history.
And anytime
Yes.
somebody builds any kind of system, there's always somebody else that looks for how to go around that system, right? And this has just always been the case. This has always been human nature, right? So the challenge I see is this. We have a exponential growth of knowledge-based computing power as well as the speed at which things are advancing, right? Now, the challenge is doing this in an ethical manner, right? So I do believe that as AI becomes more and more advanced, we run a very big risk of potentially it not functioning to the way that we want it to function, but instead it going maliciously out of the context of what we developed it
Out
for,
of control.
right?
Hmm.
Out of control. And it's going to come down to the user, right? Because think of it like this: if you created something like a sword 1,000 years ago, in the right hands, that sword brought justice. In the wrong hands, that same sword brought tyranny, right? Fast
Right.
forward a little after the creation of cannons and guns and projectile weapons, right? Same thing happened, right? In every stage of development in humanity, there's always going to be the same exact problem. There's going to be those that aim to do a positive to mankind and those that aim to do a negative to mankind. The idea here is that those that aim to do something positive need to put in the regulations to make it impossible, or at the very least more difficult, for those that wish to do harm with those same technologies, right? And this is where regulations come to play, because if we have completely no regulation and anybody can do whatever they want, then we're going to have complete chaos, right? And if we
Yes.
have too much regulation, then there's going to be like stunted innovation. There's going to be no progress moving forward. So the challenge is going to be for political individuals to find that balance. Where is the balance between not stifling the innovation, but also protecting those that don't have the information? So here, for example, in the United States, there's already been boatloads of AI based scams that are going on throughout the country, where they will make, for example, a deep fake of a human being. And the funny part of this situation? I used to sell the softwares that they're using to do this, you know? So I was one of the very first people
In the
promoting these
wrong
type of.
hands.
Exactly. Now, here's an example. I use these softwares when I needed to create content to promote my business or to educate my affiliates.
Something like Hey Jen or something like that,
Like
right?
again, at
The
the time it was called Synesthesia.io. I think they're
avatar.
still around, and what it started with was a avatar whose lips could move. So the lips would move in whatever language or thing that you needed it to speak in, right?
I
And,
still think that's so wonderful.
right? And
I still think nowadays, I think that is wonderful. I can
absolutely.
imagine how we
Here's an
are
example of something
developed.
I noticed just the other day, that this type of a technology is already in use right now. I was watching a movie on Netflix, and I realized after about 5 minutes of watching the movie, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't an American movie, but they speak as though it's perfect English. Like, how does this make any sense? And then I investigated a little further, and it turned out it was an Italian based
My
movie,
God,
right?
really?
Yeah. And all it is that the lips and voice and audio were being changed.
Like
Everything else.
big, not short videos,
Yeah,
long,
it's a full-length
long
movie.
videos.
Full-length movie. Right. So it's this same technology that once was started by companies like Synesthesia.io to make avatars that you could use for marketing, that now has been adopted to be, in the old days, if you had a movie and it would get translated to a different language, the lips
Yes.
wouldn't match, and then the audio wouldn't match, and the voice was completely different, and all these different problems for dubbing. So, for example,
90s.
in America in the
Who
90s,
were in the 90s will know about it.
oh yeah. And we used to laugh about, for example, the kung fu movies, if you remember, where it was in Japanese or in Chinese in original, but then it
Yes.
would be like, I'm going to kill you. And then you see the
Yes,
mouth moving, but
yes.
there's no audio, right? So
Very
today,
90s.
this type of technology has become like the norm, and it's being used by every major platform, if nothing else, just to make it easier for their users to enjoy the content that they created, right? And this is a great example of a positive use case of this technology, right? On the flip side of that, you can have a scammer recreate your voice, your everything. And imagine, for example, there's scams where somebody will call your family member and pretend it's you, and then they say, "Hey, I'm in jail. Can you send me money to get me out of jail?" Right? This is a very
Yes,
scary idea.
I've seen a case that the avatar was in a meeting, Google Meet or something like
Mhm.
that, but he closed like $35 million deal or something like
Yep.
massive, crazy. And yeah, we have to see how the governments are going to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I heard from somebody that I don't remember actually, but I want to know your opinion.
Sure.
It's approach like saying that all these new AIs are being given to us all for almost for free,
Mhm.
so the whole globe can adopt AI on our businesses
Yep.
on the daily basis, and then like some years ahead they are going to be very, very expensive. What do you think? It
Mm.
makes sense, but in the other hand, What do you think?
Think of it like this, right? Any platform that offers its service for free, nothing in life is free, right? Everything comes at a cost. So here's a
Yes.
simple example. I use social media every day. I'm sure you use social media every day, right? There is
Right.
no charge to us to use social media. But at the exchange of there being no charge, we have to sit there and look at ads because somebody has to pay for it, right? There's always a bill sooner or later, okay?
Yes.
Now, the truth of the matter is, what I see happening moving forward is that there's still going to be open source information and open source AI, right? And the reason that it's going to be done for free always, in my mind, at scale, is because that free user base is what you're using to train the AI, right? It's what you're using to gather the data and create the data that you need to further optimize the AI. So nobody wants to pay for while somebody else is learning or while somebody else is practicing, right? But once the data is aggregated and then that data is used to improve the AI to actually make it functional, now you have software that you can sell, right? Because now it has a value because it's working properly, right? So the way I look at it is it's always going to be free for the sake of development, right? Because it's the fastest way to allow you to develop, right? And to gather data from your users. On the flip side, finished products will always have a paywall of some kind. They're always going to be a fee, right? And the reason being is that you're paying because the product is guaranteed to work in the way that it's being promised that it's going to work. So here's an example. Imagine, for instance, you bought a pair of shoes that was experimental pair of shoes, but as soon as you start walking, they start falling apart, right? If you had to pay for that, you'd be upset. But if you
Yeah.
got that for free, you wouldn't care, right? So now let's extrapolate that into AI. So if the AI is, given to you for free so you can play with it, right? Somebody still has to pay for the computing power. Someone still has to pay for the data. Someone still has to pay for the developers and programmers and so on and so on and so on, right? So presently, for this to make sense from a business perspective, you have to have large scale industrial level investors that are putting the money for these huge projects, right? And this kind of ties into what you said before about the Trump policies to try to drive more innovation to come to the United States, right? So that side of it, I think, is good, right? Now, as we move forward, I see it where you're going to have individual products of different types of AIs that are going to be for sale for a price, right? And I don't see them being expensive unless we allow companies to monopolize the area, the space, right? And this is where part of those regulations that we were talking about before comes into play. If you allow regulators to prevent companies from becoming monopolies in the AI space, just like we prevent companies from becoming monopolies in all other forms of industry, we should be relatively okay because as long as you create an environment of competition, competition drives two things. It drives prices to come down while simultaneously driving progress to move forward, right?
Yes.
So if you think of remember I said at the beginning, I researched like 400 companies my first year before I started really getting into it. Out of those 400 companies, maybe 20% still exist, maybe, right? Everybody else no longer exists. Why?
Gone.
Gone, but not gone for a bad reason, not because they were bad people or bad companies, but because they didn't innovate fast enough, right? And or they, one company buys another company and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of reasons why they're not there, but the point is that it always allows us to springboard to move forward, right? So the key in terms of the regulation, in addition to preventing AI from going crazy and becoming like Terminator 2 and end of all humanity, okay, in addition to those concerns, you also have to have the concerns from a financial perspective of monopolizing a market space or monopolizing a market share. A perfect example of this I could give you is Nvdia. Okay, so Nvidia, before they made adjustments, we're talking like 15 years ago, before they made the massive adjustments that they made to survive and become the massive world leader they are today, they were about to go out of business before they decided to focus on the GPUs. And now, today, fast forward, they've advanced GPUs in ways we can't even imagine, right? And at a speed that it's absolutely astonishing, right? And here's the
Yes.
amazing thing. Because of this, they ended up dominating their space and basically commoditizing about 80%, 85% of the market of GPUs. So in other words, when you look at today, almost every system you could imagine uses an NVIDIA GPU, right? Or an NVIDIA-based technology. Now,
Yes.
there's another company out onto the market right now to help speed up at a lower cost point with less power consumption, the AI generation right now called Grok. Now, Grok, for example, knew that they could not compete with NVIDIA on the GPU space, right? So instead of trying to compete with Grok on GPU, they doubled down on a new technology, trying to not use GPUs to do the calculations needed or the thinking, if you will, needed by the AIs. And they created a new technology, which is as fast or faster than the fastest of the GPUs from NVIDIA, while using 1/10 of the power at 1/10 of the cost, right? So this, for example, shows you that even when you have massive entities that can control a market, whenever this happens, this creates a new innovation and a new way of thinking, right? So to me, I look at,
It's crazy.
yeah, right?
I don't know if we won't have the exterminator or something.
It very well can be, because if you think about it, the GPUs and supercomputers that exist today are what are allowing robotics to start advancing at the scale that it's advancing, right? Now, in every advance, if you will, I never mentioned this before, but I'll just throw in because it's a useful tidbit. When I was in college, I was actually a chemistry major, of all things, right? I was a very advanced chemist because studying theoretical chemistry and doing just calculations for hours, right? And one of the things that
My
you learn
God.
about in chemistry, right, is a term called a limiting reagent. And a limiting reagent in a experiment or in a chemical reaction is whichever chemical slows down the progress of the reaction happening, right? So in the dynamic of AI and technology, we're going to have always the same limiting reagent, which is energy, right? The power it takes to compute, right? And here's the example of this I'm going to give you. When Google first started as a primary search engine, right? The amount of power it took to do one search could have powered almost an entire building of apartments. Today,
My God.
that same search takes a fraction. It's the equivalent of turning on a light bulb for a split second and turning it off, right? Now, with the advent of AI and AI computing, you're now in a similar type of problem where theorists were concerned that we're not going to have enough electricity, enough power on the power grid to be able to support all the computations that an AI does for a simple interaction that of like, oh, hey, AI, tell me how to create a diet for weight loss and blah, 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 blah. So something as simple as a search like that became too expensive from a perspective of electricity. And where this first started to be realized is in computing for Bitcoin and mining for cryptocurrency, right? And everybody realized very early on that it would be an issue regarding the power consumption. And does it make sense to continue in this direction? So I think that this fostered additional changes that needed to take place in order to facilitate and move forward and progress in this direction. Into the power consumption of AI and how things are progressing, right? So, so as we had discussed before, the power consumption is critically important, right? As far as how fast can we progress. And we were talking before about the limiting reagent of technology always being the necessity of electricity, right? So different companies started looking at different ways to be able to power their systems to be able to compute the data needed, right? And to do the calculations needed. So there have been a lot of various advancements. One we mentioned before, which is Grok, and their approach to moving away from GPUs to use other technologies to do their computing, right?
Right.
And there are other companies taking an even another step forward, which to me is actually a little bit scary and is a little bit like Terminator. Okay, so there's a company out of China that has used neurocells, in other words, brain cells, to do the computing. And what they're realizing is by doing it this way, brain cells use very, very small amounts of energy, right? Because the human body in and of itself is an electrical system. And they've developed ways to use
It's scary.
it's a little scary. It's a little
Yes.
scary. So imagine a brain that is fused in part with human brain cells as well as microchips, all which are working together to run software or to run calculations. So right now we're at the early stages of potentially humanoid robots.
Artificial synapses or
Yeah, well, the artificial synapses exist already. That's the scary part. That already exists, and people don't even understand this yet. And the amazing thing of it is that they're doing the calculations of an AI, for instance, but at a fraction of the power consumption, right?
okay, so it changes everything for industry,
Yeah,
for governments, for
absolutely.
competition.
Absolutely. So now imagine this. Imagine a humanoid robot, which there are dozen companies right now that are succeeding in different versions of humanoid robots, right? With a GPU in the core in their center that's about as big as something like a speaker like this, that can run all of the movement functionalities of the body of that robot, right? And then together with that, in the head of that robot is a humanoid brain system that is combined with microchips to be able to think and reason for itself. It's going to be, in theory, a new species or a new category that's possible, right? Where you have robots with human brains functioning on software created by humans. So,
It's
you know,
very
it's
crazy.
a very crazy time we're living in. Very, very crazy
It's
time. Now,
crazy.
on the one hand, again, remember, like we said at the beginning, in the right hands, these technologies are absolutely amazing. In the wrong hands, can be devastating, right? So, from one perspective, we can think of it as this can be dangerous from a military perspective, because whichever military in the world has the first functioning robots that can attack non-robots, they're going to win by default, right? On the flip side, think of every dangerous job,
Extreme dangerous
extreme dangerous
positions,
position that human beings die doing, that you can
rescue,
have robots doing. So, for example, mining for oil in the middle of the ocean on a mining rig, right? Which is one of the most dangerous jobs a human can do. Or fishing for crabs in the barrier I'm sorry, not barrier reef, in Alaska, right? Where they in the Bering Sea, that's what I was looking for, where they have the most dangerous weather known to man, right? So in
yes,
those dynamics, imagine if you can have robots doing all those jobs. It'd be fantastic, right? But now if you imagine now you give these robots the same brainstem as a human, and these robots start thinking, wait a second, why am I helping these humans? I don't want to do these dangerous jobs either. And that's where the theories like movies like Terminator come from, because or even, for example, The Matrix, right? So we've already gotten to a point, technologically speaking, using AI actually, we've already reached the point now where we've proven that there have to be multiple universes. There have to be, because we can't compute the calculations needed without an AI in under 10,000 years. So just by logic dictates that there have to be multiple universes to be able to compute these types of calculations, right? And this opens up a lot of different unique trains of thought when it comes to physics and quantum physics and the idea of how things are connected, right? So imagine this. Imagine a world of innovation in which we could have never dreamed of it on our own. But now, with the advent of AI, it's opening so many new doors, so many new possibilities, you know? So
And
as
we are going to see it. It's not our children,
our
because
children right
it's
now.
another velocity of things.
Correct, correct. And it's happening now. And at the best case scenario, let's just pretend for a minute that there's no bad people in the world and everybody's going to use this only for good, right? If that was the case, we can have such amazing
No
advancements.
slavery, no slavery anymore,
No food
for
shortage,
example.
no slavery, no all diseases cured and corrected, right? So if you could think of, for instance, coding the human genome, this is not a new idea. This has been done already a long time ago. But imagine now having AI studying the human genome and finding all the mutations, finding ways to heal from diseases and correct problems. For instance, recently there was a invention of a new type of hydrogel for wound healing, right? Where it can heal a wound within 24 hours, right? So imagine now something like that combined with programmable AI language. Or, for instance, what is the company from Elon Musk that is making the implantable chips to help restore function in a human body, right? Doesn't that sound like the Matrix?
Yes, I've
You know
seen
what I mean?
that.
So,
Hmm.
so this is an amazing time. In my mind, it's an amazing time to be alive, right? Because there's so many amazing things happening. So I like to be in the space of AI. I want to be an optimist, but
Optimistic.
also a realist, right? So optimistically, it's a beautiful time to be alive right now because so many new advancements coming. Realistically, if God forbid people start taking advantage and doing some very negative things, they can do some dramatically negative things, right?
I think it's very similar to like industry era
Yes.
ages, because we see in the newspaper and on the internet, like, the fear is coming together with AR. It's another perspective of
Yep.
it. What do you think about labor and general work? And because the optimistic part, I agree with you, but in the other hand, there are a lot of negative perspective as well. What do you think
Yeah.
in the reality? AI agents are just shooting out the jobs of everybody. What do you think?
Well, it's a mixed bag, right? Because I feel that we're at a stage now where anybody that doesn't use AI is going to basically be left behind. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say, going back to where we started our conversation about me working in the financial sector, right? If an individual, no matter how smart they can be, let's say you take the top of the top, the top 1% of the finance industry, right? The smartest of the smart, you put any one of them against a single AI, the AI wins every single time without fail, right? Because it can work faster, smarter, with no emotion and with no sleep, right? Indefinitely. Now, you take that same individual and you empower them with AI, and now you've just improved that person's intelligence by 100-fold, right?
Perfect.
So, so I think that if we move towards labor that combines human with AI, we have a possibility for success. If we look to replace all human labor with only AI or only robotics, in that dynamic, we're asking for trouble. We're asking for danger. That's the way I look at it, right? Because any dynamic where you have a entity or a being of any kind that becomes self-sufficient and realizes that it doesn't need to listen to someone, you either get an entrepreneur like myself. I got tired of listening to my bosses and I wanted to do something for myself, right? Or you get Terminator. You know what I mean? So there's big extremes there, right? So the goal should be to find something in the middle, right? Something where you have, for example, let's say the dangerous jobs that we were talking about, right? You can have robots doing the hardest parts, but you can also have humans working alongside with them, right? To oversee the process, to make sure things don't go wrong. Because even still, at the present stage at least, we still need human intervention. At some point, we're going to get to a point very soon, I think, in the next 5-10 years, where you're going to have AIs that are training other AIs. And we're at the early stages of this now with AI
Yes.
agents. But in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to already reach a point of AGI. Now, at the point of AGI, that's going to be now a real type of actual artificial intelligence where this AGI will be able to train other AI agents and other subcategories as well. So if people want to think about the future in a optimistic or positive way, there is going to be ways to solve a lot of the world's problems, but not by removing people from the equation of AI and robotics, but by the opposite, by incorporating people into those projects and into those processes. So we're doing it from every facet. The question is who's going to get there first, right? Who's going to
Yes.
come up with the next smart innovation and so on. So, for instance, with Elon Musk right now doing those neural links where they're helping people that have been paralyzed or get the functionality in their body back and things like that. Imagine, for instance, a future where in the next 5 years you can implant something into a human being, and that thing that you've implanted will study their body and now help cure any illness that that person has before the illness progresses. So now instead of a person living to 100, they might live to 200, right? So now the question becomes, how does society change when people can live longer? The answer to this is simple. This means that within the next 5 to 10 years, we could become a society that can actually talk about in real time traveling to other planets and surviving the journey, right? Because if you think about the sheer distance of going from one planet to another and the dangers of what it can put the human body through, imagine having something where you can have an AI that can oversee those metabolic functions. Now you can keep a person alive for much longer and much healthier and much stronger and much smarter. So imagine where this can go. There's such a huge, big potential and huge future ahead of us, as long as we don't destroy ourselves first.
Yes. I heard these days, I don't remember the guy, it's from US, a huge company of personal development, something Valley. I don't know if he's
I'm not
famous,
familiar.
but he said that we are used to heard about SaaS, and he was talking about RAAS, result as a service, like with
Mm,
the AI that we have now,
right.
and they plug a lot, as you said in the beginning, that you were thinking, you were a visionary back then, like plug many of process. So
Yep.
like a marketing agency, with one click, the agent, the AI will test it all, will just give you back a report, and then you
Yep.
choose if you continue, but it will do everything. Plus he brought the idea of having 4 days of labor in US. That's something that we can't
Right.
imagine. So it's a human shift in our history, because it will change a
Absolutely.
lot of things. And as we are talking here, there is the dark side of it as well.
Right.
But we can't deny that is changing everything, and
Yep.
everybody is a little bit afraid of seeing Musk and Trump all the time together in the same room.
Yep.
So yes.
So I think the way I look at it is like this, right? The concept of the 4-day work week and all this stuff has been around for a long time, and in certain European countries and certain European cities, this has been going on for many, many years, and it's been
But I
proven.
couldn't imagine in US.
Well, it's just a matter of the philosophy of the people, right? So if you think about the youngest generation right now going into the workforce, right? A lot of employers have basically been letting these kids go, like young college age kids. So let's say people half my age, right? And the reality of it is, I think on one hand, it's part of what's pushing for the innovation for AI agents to do a lot of these menial tasks that people don't want to
Mm-hmm.
keep doing and being repetitive on. But I think the key to it is to maintain the human creativity in the process, right? Because if you can give the best AI possible today, right, it can only extrapolate based on what it sees in the world around it, right? But everything in the world around it that it is analyzing was by the creativity of human beings. It wasn't by the creativity of an AI, right?
Yes.
So the challenge that I see moving forward, at least in the next 5 years, is going to be that there's going to be a ton of AI generated information that is simply repetitive of AI copying itself over and over and over again. So when you were mentioning before the potential for in the future AI being very expensive and people being able to access it being expensive, I agree with you, but I agree from the perspective that it will be expensive when you need expert level creativity.
Mm-hmm.
But it will not be expensive. It will be either free or extremely affordable to all of mankind, just like how once only the rich had a telephone. Today, the poorest person at least has a cell phone, which the cell phone in and of itself is a computer, right?
Yes.
So think about it from that perspective. I think that what's going to happen as we move forward in time, as the AIs become more advanced, as well as humans, we become more advanced, right? We're going to become reliant on the creativity of experts, and we're going to need to pay for that creativity, but not so much for the AI itself. The AI itself will, in my mind, should be used as a tool. It should be like a hammer or a screwdriver or any other tool that you would use, right? So I see it as the potential to speed up and increase the quality and quantity of human creativity. That's the direction I see it going. And I think that if we do this with a ethical scope in mind, where we have
Regulation and
regulation and morality behind it, because regulation is one thing. Just because something is legal doesn't make it right? So throughout human history, we have examples of this, right?
yes, sure.
Racism used to be legal in most parts of the world. Today, it's illegal in most parts of the world. We can agree that it's better that racism is illegal, not legal, right? Because that allows for people to oppress other people. In the same way, information and technology can be used the same, right? So if you limit people's ability to access information and access technology, you can oppress them very easily, right? So, in my mind, the access to the information and access to the technology should be open for everyone. On the flip side, there should be regulations in place that prevent the misuse of these tools. So in America, for instance, a big argument or a big debate has always been the right to have a gun, right? The Second Amendment, it's a big topic in America. Every political cycle, they always talk about it and everything else, right? The reason it's such a big deal in the United States and the reason that it was put into place by the founding fathers of the country was so that if there were ever a point where the government became too powerful or too strong, that the people had the right to fight back, right? To prevent the misuse of government or prevent the misuse of these technologies, right? Now, in reality, if the people wanted to overthrow the government, they simply do not have the technological means because the government at minimum is 7 to 10 years more advanced than the technology that they allow into the open market, right? And this is logical because you can only control something if you are more advanced than what you are controlling. But if what you're trying to control is more advanced than you are, then you're never going to be able to control it, right? So to this advent, I think that if we look at things from moving forward for AI from a moral perspective of making sure that the regulations are there to prevent harming one another and to promote progress and helping one another, if those two tenets are the foundation for how the regulations are created, I think we'll be successful. If they are not, I see wide scale chaos possible, like the stuff that you see in the movies. So
Yes.
we have to be mindful of this. And my perspective has always been, no matter what I've done in my life, has always been to try to help people, right? Whether it's through knowledge or through education or through a service or in any capacity to help people. So if we train our AI agents with this type of philosophy as their underlying core principle, I think we have a chance that they won't take over the world and try to kill us. I think we have a chance.
The thing is the honors of the technology. It's much worse than the AI for itself. But excellent.
What is the AI learning from, right? So imagine if the AI was learning from Gandhi versus learning from Hitler, right? You're going to get two completely different outcomes in those dynamics, right? So
Yes.
I think the key is going to be who and what it is that we're teaching and using to program the AIs.
As a recipe.
Yeah.
Cooking recipe. Yes.
Exactly.
Sure. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to enter the AI space today? Like it's very different from 2 years ago. How do you see that? What advice would you give?
So, question before I give the answer, because I don't want to give one of those vague answers that doesn't help anybody. I want to actually give an answer that helps people. So, I want to break it down into novice, intermediary, and advanced, right?
Cool.
So, someone that's a novice, never heard of AI, never seen AI, never nothing, right? That person, immediately start playing with any AI you want, right? Play with it, ask it questions, talk to it, communicate with it immediately. The intermediary person, people that are like me, right? I consider myself not advanced. I consider myself an intermediary, right? Because I'm not the one creating the AIs from scratch, but I am the type of person that will train an AI to do tasks for me, right? So I'm in the middle. So for the middle ground, my advice would be learn and always stay at the forefront of what is changing and what is coming, because you will have the ability to create new creations of your own with the tools being provided to you, so that you can otherwise create more value. Very similarly to what I was talking about that I used to do before, creating those optimizations, creating those connections, right? Think of it like networking, but from a technological perspective. Okay?
Yes.
For those that are the advanced, that are the creators, the innovators of the newest technologies, I would give the advice like this. Be mindful that your input will always control the rate of the output. And be mindful that if you give a good example, you will get a good output. If you give a bad example, you'll get a bad output, right? So
Right.
I would tell them to think of it the same way that a parent thinks of raising their child. If a parent ignores the child and lets the child do whatever they want, one of two things happens to that child. Either the child gets hurt or dies at a young age, or the child becomes completely chaotic, destroying their life and all the lives around them. If the child is given proper guidance, proper nutrition, proper education, then that person becomes a productive adult that benefits society. In a very same fashion, if we look at the way we're creating these technologies and the way that we're educating these AI agents, is just like educating a child, right? If you give the right materials, if you give the right recipe, you get a good outcome, you get a good child, right? AI will be the same thing. If you give it the right tools to study, you'll get amazing outputs. The future for us is limitless, right? But it can be limitless amazing things or limitless horrible things. It's on us to guide that ship in the right direction. So the innovators, the creators, the developers that are making all these new innovations, I would advise them to think very carefully about the information that they are putting into these AIs and the way in which they allow these AIs to extrapolate that information. That would be
Perfect.
my three-part answer.
Perfect. Isa, what is the AI that you use the most on the
Whoa,
daily basis, every
great
day,
question.
or what's your favorite AI on the daily basis?
On a daily basis. The answer to that, honestly, is whatever's the newest one. Here's why, right? I love educating myself. I've always been the type of person that I want to learn as much as I
We can
can,
see
as fast
that
as I can, right?
you are a visionary.
Yeah, I've always been this way, ever since I can remember myself from a childhood, right? And for me, I would say the one I've been having a lot of fun with lately is something called Notebook LM, right? And it's one of the AIs that was created by Google. And this is a great example of what I was mentioning, where this AI is not something that's made to think for itself, but it's something that's more made to help a person study and help a person quickly understand vast amounts of information, right? So, as a funny story or funny example, recently, about a few months ago, I got a few opportunities that I'm working towards right now, a couple different projects to help with investments here in Arizona to develop homes for homeless individuals and so on. And in the
Okay.
conversations that led to these bigger projects, one of the topics that were important that we discussed between the team of investors that I work with was how do we find the investment capital? How do we find the money needed to continuously grow these types of projects, right? And in this conversation of trying to come up with an idea creatively, I was investigating US trusts and how trusts are used and life insurance policies are used to grow and invest money so that that money could then be used for other projects like real estate and homelessness and hunger and other things, right? And when I started diving into this concept, it very quickly became very overwhelming because there were tens of thousands of pages of information and no way that one person can learn all of it quickly. So I said, wait a minute. Let me take a pause.
Someone can read it for me.
Yes. Let me let somebody else read it for me and just tell me the important parts, right? So something you may or may not know about me is I'm one of those individuals that has a very high functioning ADHD problem, right? So when I focus on a problem or a task that I need to find a solution for, I can hyper fixate on this issue and focus for hours without even realizing, right? So, in one such evening, I took Notebook LM and I uploaded thousands of pages of trust law from the United States, from the Treasury Department, into Notebook LM.
Okay.
And I told it, summarize and give me bullet points for each of the main ideas or main concepts. And anytime I came to a bullet point or came to a concept and I didn't understand it, I asked it to explain it to me. Long story short, in about 4 or 5 hours of one of these fugue states where I get hyper focused, I usually go into these states by playing myself in my headphones. I use binaural beats to help put me in the right mindset, if you will. And I started researching and going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the Notebook LM, asking it questions based on the data that I gave it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a matter of one overnight session, right? Because I started at like midnight and I stopped at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning.
My God.
And on one such session, I taught myself basically everything I needed to know on how to build a trust, how to set up a trust, which type of trust are important, and all the things that my investors needed me to know. You know,
It's
so as
wonderful.
so as an example, normally somebody goes to law school, then spends their entire career as a lawyer to learn what I learned in one night, right?
It's
And
unbelievable.
and it's not because I'm necessarily super smart or I'm a genius or whatever, but I don't have to be because the AI does it for me, right? And that's the beautiful part of it, where again the human creativity side of things comes into play, right? I don't claim by any means to be a genius, all right? I'm not Elon Musk, I'm not somebody in that same space, but it doesn't mean that I cannot have the same access to the same way of thinking, right? As long as you're willing to open your mind to the possibility that you're not the smartest person, you will always become the smartest person. Does that make sense? Right?
Yes.
Because people that think they know everything, they never learn anything. And people that
Yes.
are always questioning and always asking why, how come, how do I do this? That curiosity factor, that's the human creativity. And I think that is what we have to push in all the future generations, right? Being able to fan that flame of knowledge, of curiosity, is what's going to keep us moving in the right direction, keep us moving forward. So this was just a simple use case. But there are numerous use cases like this where AIs are being used, for instance, to diagnose cancers very early on, or to diagnose various illnesses. Because imagine, here's another use case. Let's say you have a person that does MRIs and X-rays. They could be 30 years of experience and still miss key details and key important things. But an AI trained on those same images will never miss those things, ever. Right? And that's the beautiful part of it, where if you take the knowledge of the person with 30 years of experience and you boil that down and use that knowledge to teach an AI can take 30 years of knowledge and spit it out for you in seconds, right? So now, if you can get that same knowledge in seconds, now you take that level of speed and multiply that by 30 years. It's the same as the original person having studied for 2,000 years or 3,000 years. Does that make sense? Because of
Yes,
the
of course
speed
it
at
makes.
which you're able to use the knowledge, the speed at which you're using the data. So in the same example, like what I was describing, like I didn't spend years reading thousands of pages and experiencing it to have to learn it. I learned it in one night because I just kept asking questions and then deriving the necessary data that was important, right?
I guess
So
the smart thing is our capability of linking the dots, because the
uh,
knowledge for itself is there on
sure.
Google, on AI, but with our intelligence and creativity, we can bring it to new ideas and linking
And new
with
connection points.
our
Yep.
brain.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful.
I think another piece of advice I would give for individuals looking to get into the AI space and moving forward into the future, right? Um, I'm very fortunate in that my ADD, with years of trying to learn how to use it to my advantage, has given me the ability to do what's called pattern recognition very well, right? And this is effectively what we're teaching AIs to do, right? We're teaching them to recognize patterns and look for patterns in things, right? And that's how we're making all these amazing discoveries. So, what I would advise individuals is to think with that in mind, that as they're trying to increase their knowledge about AI and use AI to their benefit and to the benefit of humanity, think of it from the perspective of pattern recognition. Use the AI to locate and find patterns that you would have otherwise not been able to find yourself, and then make those connection points or those linkage points. Great way to think about it is look at the wall behind me. If you see where all these points connect, this is just a random design. But imagine if this random design was the blueprint of multiple AI agents talking to one another. At every point where they meet each other, That's a new product or a new service or a new technology that's being created at the intersection points, right? So that's what I would advise individuals to think about. I would tell them, think about how to engage and create these intersection points. For instance, right now, I believe that,
Excellent advice.
right? So
Perfect. All
in the
to
next,
do with the result as a service.
you got it. And this is going to go moving forward also with regard to search engines, right? In the next 5 to 10 years, unless Google does a massive pivot in the direction of AI, they're going to be obsolete, right? Because if you think about it, the youngest generation right now uses AIs to search for information more than it uses Google to search for the same information, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, AI is able to disrupt even the most disrupted markets, if that makes any sense.
It's
So,
very crazy. Yes, of course it
right?
makes sense. Today I made a test. I was doing a system and I tested 80 LLMs.
Mm-hmm.
And for my surprise, Gemini
Yeah,
2 was the best than Perplexity,
yeah,
ChatGPT 4, all of them. So
yeah.
they are competing. They are
All
competing, and
competing.
it depends of the
Yeah,
task. It depends of the task, but was a surprise because I thought that Perplexity or ChatGPT 4 would be the best, and no, Gemini was
right.
far better. And yeah, this
What I
phrase
do
is
is,
perfect.
yeah.
The
So if you
AI
think about
is
the
being
results of the service
disruptive
idea,
with the disruptive markets. Perfect.
and if you think about how the results as a service idea came to be, right? It's the same thing that I was referring to as AI optimizations. At the end of the day, I was trying to create a result, right? And the result was
Yes.
good video content being distributed across all the social media platforms. That was my result goal, right? So I think that industry drives these types of things. So as we move forward into the future with AI, I think that we're going to be able to create various AI agents to work together to give us better final results, right? The question will become, what are our goal results, right? What are we trying to accomplish, right? So if the person has a goal of helping humanity, guess what? They'll achieve it. If a person has a goal of hurting humanity, guess what? They'll achieve it. So
I
it
guess ONU will have to enter on this debate because won't
yeah,
have just one perspective of it for
sure,
sure.
for sure.
Um, Isa, uh, tell us about it's frozen. Okay,
Oh,
back.
okay.
Uh, tell us a little bit about your projects, what you were doing, what is your perspective for yourself on AI, and etc.
Well, a few things. So I have a couple of things on my agenda these days. Since the last time that you and I had spoken years ago, I went through some health challenges of my own and difficulties that I went through, and
Okay.
uh, I was basically this close to not being on the planet anymore. And thankfully, I took it upon myself to basically heal myself from my medical conditions, and very happy to say that I got a second chance at life. And I feel like in this next stage in my life, my goal has become to try to leave as much of a positive influence on humanity as I can. I want to leave behind a legacy of helping people and driving the right type of progress moving forward. So right now,
You were energized before this challenge. I imagine now
way more.
how you feel and the things you are going to build.
Way more, yeah, exactly. Like I always had this drive in me to help people around me, but now even more so because I realized that information is key, and the expression "knowledge is power," right? And whatever
Yes.
knowledge I didn't have was what was making me sick. And once I found that knowledge, I was able to correct my illnesses on my own in ways that the medical profession as a whole didn't help me whatsoever, right? So, in a similar fashion, I want to be able to give back in any and every way that I can. So as far as projects now that I'm working on, I've been working the last 2 years on my first book. And the concept of this book actually originated a few years back when you first met me, because even then I was going to write a book series to basically help with my business and help grow my community, if you will. And the concept was there, but I didn't know what was important for me to actually put into the book. So now, after going through everything I went through and coming out on the other side of it alive and healthy again and
Thanks,
getting my
God.
energy back, right? The first book I'm putting out is called Overcome. In life, if you learn to overcome your obstacles, you will never be overcome. And it's meant to be a inspirational book to the next generation, right? The goal of it being to give a simple concept in people's minds, right? In English, we have this simple word overcome, and it has two primary definitions, right? On one hand, it's a positive thing to overcome obstacles, to overcome challenges. This is a positive. On the other hand, it's a negative when someone is emotionally overcome or depressed and overwhelmed with life, right? The problem is that what people fail to realize is that being overcome emotionally comes from a lack of knowledge. And if you can correct this, then guess what? You're no longer limited by being overwhelmed because you have the knowledge and your ability to overcome these problems, right? So the first book in the series, it's going to be a 4-part series that I'm writing. So the first book is Overcome, with the subtitle, In Life, If You Learn to Overcome Your Obstacles, You Will Never Be Overcome. It's a little bit autobiographical and a little bit inspirational to show people that if I can do it, you can do it. I'm nobody special, but I was able to succeed in life in a variety of different ways. And even in areas where I had no knowledge and no expertise, when I applied myself, I found the ways to save my own life, right? And I want to push this message to others that if you, instead of looking for the solution outside of yourself, if you internalize and you look for the solutions internally, you'll find the answers always, right? The second book in that series is going to be Overcome, Being Overcome. And the idea is the second book is me teaching you now to think the way I think, right? Me teaching you that how to overcome individual specific problems that are plaguing society, right? So how to overcome health challenges, how to overcome financial challenges, how to overcome emotional challenges, anything that challenges a person's ability to succeed in life. I'm trying to give them the tools by which they could succeed and overcome those problems, right? The third book in the series is going to be called Leverage. And this book is also going to be a little bit autobiographical, but the idea of it is teaching that if you understand how to leverage things, you will always be able to overcome an obstacle. Okay. And what I mean by this is if you think about where I started in the AI space or technology space, right? I was not a developer, not a programmer. I still to this day cannot program in a single programming language, right? However, I've been more successful in this category than most programmers and developers have been.
Yes.
Right? Because they don't think the way I think. They don't think about combining things to make a new thing. They think about, I'm going to create something from scratch and I'm going to make the best version of that I can make. The problem is that that's limiting, right? So what's funny is we have this expression, and I'm sure it's been translated in every language on the planet, but everybody always says that it's not a good thing to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. But what people don't realize is that that expression actually has a continuation. That's not the whole expression. The whole expression is actually, it's better to be, it goes like this. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but still better than a master of one. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So
makes sense.
if you think about it, right, if you think about every successful CEO, entrepreneur in the world, right, they all have the same thing in common. They all know how to do a multitude of different skill sets at the same time. That's what makes them successful. Not that they're the best at a single skill set, right? So in the same fashion, technologically, AI and everything that's moving forward is going to work in the same way. There are going to be companies that try to master a single category, and they're going to be successful to a degree. But the companies that are going to master combining different skill sets, they're going to be always the most successful companies. Case in point, if you think about companies like Amazon and Alibaba,
companies and professionals.
yeah, in the same capacity, it's always about being able to think creatively. So in the leverage book, the goal is for me to talk about how you can leverage your knowledge, or how I leverage knowledge and education and communicating with people to be able to build relationships that helped me progress in life, right? Because when I first started in this space, I was getting myself into opportunities and meetings with CEOs of massive companies that I had no business talking to, right? In reality, at that time. But I was able to impress them with my knowledge and show them that I could think creatively in ways that they couldn't think. As advanced as they were, it didn't matter because I was thinking differently, right? And this is what I want to demonstrate in this book, right? And then the final book of the 4-part series is going to be called Overcoming Leverage, right? And the idea is in the final book, it's combining the whole concept from the original book, right? Where in this dynamic, I want to teach others how I overcame and how they can overcome when their leverage is against them. So example, when you think of a massive company in a certain sector, there's no point in trying to compete with that company head to head, right? You're never going to be able to win. Okay, you have to be able to come at it from a different perspective, a different angle, right? So in overcoming leverage, this is where I am going to teach people that if you are over leveraged in a situation, in order to switch the leverage back to your side, you need to come from a different perspective. And I'm going to tie all of this in together for you in a very funny way that I think you'll appreciate. Do you know where I got this philosophy from? Of all the things in the world, from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
I didn't understand. Sorry, repeat, please.
Of all of the ways that I could have come to this philosophy or this idea, right? I actually came to it because I was a student of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's specifically...
really?
Yeah. And it's specifically designed, right, for a smaller opponent to be able to overtake and beat a larger opponent, right? That's the whole basis of what jiu-jitsu is all about. And the fun part of it is...
a strategy.
This strategy actually comes from martial arts, and the idea behind it is if you take two people, right, and both of them studied, for example, karate, and one person was 100 pounds heavier than the other, 99.9% of the time, if they learn the same punch, same kick, same everything, the bigger person will win if the two of them fight. In jiu-jitsu, it's not like that. In jiu-jitsu, it's whoever has the better knowledge, whoever has the better creativity, right, to be able to overcome the obstacle, right? So I learned this early on when I first started jiu-jitsu. I was a football player and very like American football, not world football, but American football. And I was a big tough guy and used my muscles and dove headfirst into things. And the funny part was that was my biggest learning experience of my life, because when I first started jiu-jitsu, I was 300 pounds, muscular, and at the strongest point of my life. And guys that were half my size were kicking my butt, right? And I didn't understand it at first. It took me 6 months of losing to guys half my size to realize what I was doing wrong, right? And what I was doing wrong is that I was overcommitting, right? I was overcommitting to things that I thought were good, which was strength and power, when in reality, I should have overcommitted to knowledge, right? And the funny part is, when I became myself a competitive fighter in my younger years, I actually used to be the smaller guy. Usually when I would go to competitions, I would fight guys that made me look small, and I was always winning. And it made sense. Why? Because instead of trying to fight muscle with muscle, I would lose every time, of course. But muscle with knowledge, being able to understand to redirect my opponent's own strengths against them, that's what allowed me to be successful in that category in martial arts. So in the same way, in business, it's the same, right?
Like
If,
Troja
if I
horse.
try, yeah, like if I try right now to go against Google, guess what? I'm going to lose every time. But if I partner with Google and create a new avenue that helps them, guess what? They're going to be my best friends, right? And in the same
Yes.
fashion, this is exactly what I did when I was describing making these different companies work together, right? I was taking the strength of one company and another, and then mixing them to make something even better than any one of those companies would have done separately on their own, right? So in this fashion, this is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give anybody in the AI space and in general in the business space, right? Don't think of your competitors as your competition. There's no such thing. When you think about high level business, there is no competition because you work with your competitors. You team up with them in a variety of different ways. And this is what really makes people successful.
And you grow your market.
Exactly.
Yes, beautiful. I admire a lot your way of thinking. And I'm pretty sure everybody will read it, and I'm glad that you are already writing it. So,
Hopefully, yeah.
Isa, we've learned so much from you today. I want to thank you for your insights, your AI insights. It's been a
My pleasure.
pleasure having you on the show. And where can our listeners find more about you, about your work, talk to you? What do you would
No,
say?
that's a good question. So right now it's a little bit challenging. I would say the best way that people can reach me these days is just contact me directly. So I can give you my email. They can reach out anytime. It's just Eza Israel, the number one at gmail.com. It's my direct personal email, and I give it out to everybody. Right, is the best way to reach me. But beyond that, at the moment, I don't have any websites or anything built. But you can find me also via social media at Eza Israel on pretty much every platform. So if you think of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, I'm Eza Israel everywhere. So you can find me that way as well. But moving forward in the future, I will plan in the next year, I'm going to be relaunching hopefully my SaaS business and the results as a service business as well. And then along with that, there have been several companies that have approached me to be their spokesman actually for promoting their new innovations. One such company is actually out of the Netherlands. They're called Devemos. And moving forward in the next coming year, hopefully, I will be presenting their product lines as well. And they themselves, what they have done is they've taken existing AI components, combined them together into a massive marketing engine. And their idea is to help businesses reach out to their existing lead bases and find new clientele from existing pools of data. So basically not just the data aggregation, but data retargeting, right? And also being like an all-in-one encompassing software. So this is going to be one of the projects I'm working on for this year. And then locally here in Arizona, I have a few real estate projects that we're putting together to try to tackle the homelessness problem here in Arizona. And this is part of what I was mentioning before about giving back to humanity and giving back to society. So I've started a nonprofit. My nonprofit, just like all my other brands, has always been called USFA. So we just adopted the same idea. And the nonprofit is called USFA as well, but it has a different meaning for the acronym. The nonprofit stands for United Services for All. And our mission is going to be first here locally in Arizona to help with our veterans from the military that are going through different challenges and dealing with homelessness and lack of support and services that they need desperately. So we're going to be addressing this from a couple different facets. So first, we're going to be working on the real estate side of it to give people homes and a place to live. Together with that, as we expand the real estate
Yes.
portfolio and we're building communities, we're going to also add services to those communities that we're building. So we're going to provide, under the nonprofit arm, a church for them. The church is going to be called the Brothers in Arms Church. And the idea is it's going to be a church that is open and welcoming to all nationalities, all faiths, but particularly focusing on veterans and soldiers and their families, right? These are the entities that need our love and support and caring the most. So we're going to be providing that for them as an additional service. Along with that, we've partnered with some of the local large food banks to be able to provide food for those individuals that don't have food accessibility that easily. And then, together with that, the final step or the final stage is that once we've built a big enough community for helping our veterans, we're going to also tie in medical services as well, such as physical therapy, emotional therapy, occupational therapy, and any manner of helping them through PTSD and the mental disorders that can come from the traumas that they go through as being soldiers. So, this is my long-term vision, my long-scale vision is to use my entrepreneurial skill set, but for channeling it for as much positivity as I can create around me. And I'm always looking for
Beautiful, and I'm
people to
sure
team with.
that you will succeed in everything that you do. I'm
I
pretty sure
appreciate
of
it.
it, and I will follow your work because I like a lot you and your family.
Thank you so much.
So today we had the pleasure of hosting Eza Israel, an enthusiast and pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence. Isa, thank you for being with us today.
A
Thank
pleasure.
you all for listening to the AI Insights podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thank you, Isa.